Hey, boss, do you have a second? I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Or maybe it was a small comment that you made at a meeting that said the thing that everybody was thinking, but nobody else wanted to say. Many leaders spend their entire careers chasing metrics, results, promotions. Yet when people think of the organizations that shape them, they rarely talk about quarterly goals. They do, however, talk about how they were treated, what they learned, who supported them, and how they helped them become the person or the organization they were hoping to be. This episode explores the imperfect reality of a person's impact and how it's rarely defined by what they do. Rather, it's a function of when they do it, how they do it, and even more so, a function of just how willing others are to receive it. Impact is often invisible, frequently delayed, and significantly hard to quantify because it's ultimately about the true legacy of leadership.
That ripple effect, Jeff, when you said hey, boss, do you have a minute? I had that visceral recalling of all the bosses I've had and how they might respond in that moment. What made you think of ripple effect today?
There's some stuff going on with some of our clients that you and I have been talking about the power of impact. And then that led me to think about the people who were so impactful on me, whether it was small check-ins, the harsh piece of feedback I needed to hear. And that trickles down to how is that feedback delivered? When someone pulls you aside and tells you that you've been a chucklehead, but it's done because they care about you, that's significantly different than when you get called out and embarrassed and put on the spot. And so it really was about picking. I was working with a client earlier this week on picking and choosing their moment on how they could really lend their expertise in a way that might otherwise fall flat. And it really made me think about like, hey, that's really what impact is about picking your moment. And we'll talk a little bit later in the episode about the impact equation, which is something that you and I came up with earlier this week to help that client. But really about then how can we as leaders create a meaningful change and a lasting impact?
When it comes to ripple effect, that means to me, you don't have to have all of your impact in that one moment. It can be a small nudge, a tiny comment or encouragement, a slight redirect, as opposed to drastic, major, loud, noise-filled impact. It's the tiny shifts that appear to have more of a flywheel effect over time and accumulate in the form of change I can own as the recipient rather than having it done to me. These are little moments that happen for me. How does a person know when feedback is coming their way if the intention is to help or harm?
I don't know that they always do. I think that that's a matter of how open am I to receive it? Am I palms up in the moment, or am I in a defensive crouch because I'm somehow activated or triggered or in a fight or flight? And then I think some of it has to do with the delivery. What's the audience? You're in the middle of a crowded room and someone yells, "Hey, Hendrik, pull your head out of your rear end." Maybe that's what you need. Maybe that person has the ability to say that to you and you'll receive it this way because you have that rapport and that relationship. Or maybe that environment will cause such a what happened, and then you kind of get defensive. So I think that there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think some of it's the situation, some of it's the person, some of it's the context, tone of voice. I mean, this is more than just the what. This is really a how, a when, a why,
and a how much.
Ooh.
A simple redirect here and there. Hey, I've got a small tweak to share with you. Lands very differently from, oh, here she comes again. She's going to give me more feedback that it wasn't good enough. It wasn't, I call it the choke up on the bat. My coach, George Bynum, who played for the Cleveland Indians back in the day when they were the Cleveland Indians, he said, "You've got potential, kid, but you've got a wild arm." I kind of took that as a badge of, yeah, I'm bolder, you don't know what you're going to get from me. Of course, that is not a compliment. It is, you need to home in. And he would pick every practice, he would pick one element of my game to work on: knuckles on the ball, step and release, like little pieces. And I know that if you asked him in a quiet space what's wrong with Hendrick's pitch, he would have, or Herzenberg at the time, he would have 1,000 things that he could say that I needed to fix and do better. But he metered out those nudges in a way that I was able to receive them, A, in the spirit which he intended, which is to make me better, and B, knowing that he had enough belief in me that I wasn't a total train wreck. I'd had enough no-hitters that I was worth investing in, but he just seemed to have that sweet spot of knowing where to hit. So how much I appreciate what you just said, that ripple effect. If you had a cabinet full of people who have impacted you over your life and career, is there a thread of something they have in common?
Great question. Not at all where I thought you were going to go with that when you started. One is I was open to it at the time, and two, that it was delivered from a place of concern. So like their motive was to help me, and I was open to it, because I can think of lots of times people tried to help, and right, like, I ain't trying to hear that. But then there's other moments where something small or even something significant was delivered in a way that it was like, wow.
What you just said, it made me think differently about my answer. So let me tell you what I appreciate first, and I'll give you mine. I expected, when I said, what do these people who've had an impact on you, what do they have in common? I thought you would index to a behavior, something they did. And the neat part is you went to two elements that are not external behaviors. One of them is my receptivity as the person getting the feedback, and the other is their intent. Both of those things are very internal, personal. It's not, like you said, it's not the action or the behavior itself. It's the intention, the receptivity, openness, the concern behind it. Now, my answer to that same question that I would have answered differently a few minutes ago, my cabinet has in common the positive push.
Ooh, okay.
Positive push would mean they know there's more in me than that moment where I'm not pitching well, for example, or I'm not showing up with the right presence in a workshop, or I handle a conflict poorly. The positive push means, Susan, you can do better. And not in a shaming way, but also not in an overly supportive way. It has to be a balance of support and challenge. Positive support, push, challenge. So that's what my cabinet has in common. And P.S., you're in it.
I appreciate that. One person who stands out to you is or one moment that you would share with the listeners, like, this thing really hit me hard. What would it be?
A moment when I was ready to give up on something, and I had every right to give up. I had tried my best. The context was not ideal. I wasn't being treated in the best way. There were all the external signs that most people could and would walk away and sleep well at night. And my mentor at the time said to me, don't you dare quit now. This is your defining moment. This is the moment when 99% of the people would walk away. And that's that quote that Brene Brown brings up. Was it Teddy Roosevelt who said in the arena?
Oh yeah, the man in the arena. It's not the critic who counts, or the one who points out how the strong man stumbled, or how the doer of deeds might have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena.
Goosebumps. Yes, that
Yeah.
one. That was my moment. He said, don't let the immediacy of frustration, disappointment, exhaustion, all these legitimate things, don't let that moment define who you are. This is your moment to rise above. And it's almost like there was music, rocky music in the background. And at the time I was really mad because I was tired and I was ready to walk out. But him believing in me and pushing me past the pain, on the other side of your pain lies your purpose, was the
Yeah.
message. That was my moment of greatest impact. And the irony is, I didn't really do anything right after that moment. I went home. I didn't quit in that day, but I didn't do anything glorious or groundbreaking. I just simply didn't decide in that moment to say I've had enough. How about you?
I was but my sixth grade teacher, a lady by the name of Debbie Standish, amazing. Loved her. She was super, like probably the first person outside of my mom and dad who really believed in me. And I was a bit of a misfit child. And I will never forget. So I had her for sixth grade. Seventh grade, my seventh grade teacher, I won't name her, but she told me one time as I was sitting in detention for like the thousandth time that year that I would never amount to anything. And I was like, yeah. So I still remember this woman. And every time I have a little bit of a success, I'm like, right? Sometimes we think about impact in positive ways or positive contributions, but that negative comment that she made to me, probably because I stressed her out and pushed her to her wits' end. Because have you seen the meme that was like the little kid and it says, "You can move my chair as many times as you want. I'm not going to stop talking." Right? It's like the little, right? That was me. Right? I was
That
that.
was
I
you.
was that misfit. But that piece of feedback that spoke to me. There was something about that that has always stood with me. That every time I wanted to quit, every time I wanted to give up, I think back to my seventh grade teacher and I'm like, I won't let you be right. I'm not going to let you be right. You offered this lovely example of like when someone showed you care and tenderness. And I'm offering a counterexample on purpose because again, that ripple effect. She threw a stone in the water, probably from her sense of frustration, but it hit me in a way. I was probably what, 11 or 12. I'm a lot older than that now. So 34 years later, I still remember, okay, Mrs. Taylor.
Okay, so let's go back to your original statement about what makes someone have impact. My openness, you said, and their intent.
And that's
Yeah.
me like years of scar. But I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to share my screen for a second. The impact equation talks about when the pieces come together. So, is the timing right? Praise in public, reprimand in private. Do you speak up when someone's about to make a mistake, right? Is the timing right? Or is it a moment later on where it would be better to say, hey, that thing, what might have gone better? How could you have done it? So there's
Mhm.
the timing. What's the intent? What's the goal behind it? This is where I get hung up about my seventh grade teacher. I don't think her goal was to make me better. I think her goal was to vent her frustration. But what's the intent? Are you trying to help the person? Hey, your fly is down. Fix yourself. Or, hey, I care about you and I want you to do better. Or I'm worried about you. Are you sure you're okay? You don't look like your normal self. The context, what's happening around it? What's the situation? We've all seen some version of a sports movie where the athlete isn't successful and the coach walks up behind him and puts their arm around him in that moment to offer it. What's happening there? The delivery, how's it communicated, right? Am I yelling across the cafeteria or across the auditorium, hey, you suck? Or am I saying, way to go, right? Like you're cheering. And in that moment, am I ready to receive it? I think that's the bottom line, right? So that's binary. That's a one or a zero. I'm either willing and open, in which case anything you do on the top is going to be value added. In that moment, as I was sitting there exasperated about, oh my God, I'm in detention again, something has got to change. The timing was right. The intent, the value could be high or low. Context was different, but the delivery, I was receptive to it. So the impact was big. And I
Mm.
think that that's where the ripple comes from.
Jeff, looking at the equation and thinking back to your seventh grade teacher, the intent number might have been very low in that moment. That was about her intent. But your timing, context, I don't want to be here. I don't want to, I don't want to feel like this. And her poor delivery were not overshadowed by your readiness. That receptivity being high made it not only a salvage moment, but a bit of a defining moment. Anthony Kiedis, I don't ever want to feel like I did that day,
Yeah.
that visceral memory. So this equation to me is extraordinarily powerful. I'd love for our listener to think about a scenario in which someone had impact on you. Start from the end in mind. Think of that ripple effect of the impact they've had on you, positive, negative, in between. And then deconstruct using the equation. What was it about that moment, person, context, etc.? If so, for Mr. Bynum, with my softball coach, I had a decent season that year, but I wasn't, barely over 500, and that was not my standard for self. And so I was in a down context, and so my receptivity was higher because I knew I needed help, but it was also lower because I felt shame for not living up to my potential. So that kind of wobbled, but I knew his intent. Dear listener, what is your moment of impact? And now think about yourself as a leader, and how can you use that equation of, is this the right timing? Check my intent. Am I doing this because I want to help the project, help the person, help the team? Or am I doing this because I want to show how smart I am or how stupid they are, or they're human beings? So check your intent at the door is a piece of it. And then the last piece on there, the delivery, that's where we train in leadership classes. We train on delivery. We don't talk enough about choosing your moment. And I
Yeah.
just came from a meeting where I chose not to speak in that moment. And that goes against the person I've become. I've become a very feedback, timely, in the moment person, except publicly praise, privately correct or reprimand. And in that moment, it would have been a scarf threat for me to bring it up. And I was going to call immediately after, but I recognize that that person needs a victory lap right now, and they've achieved something amazing. And these tweaks that I'm going to offer, important to me perhaps, but I don't need to be a buzzkill to her in that moment. So
Yeah.
I love the flexibility of the equation to choose your timing, choose your delivery, and be thinking about your intent and the context with it. And that will impact their receptivity in the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, right. I mean, we talk frequently that feedback is a gift. And I try to, talk to leaders about having courageous conversations and offering feedback and being able to share things. And we have talked about it very superficially as how you do something is almost as important, if not more important, than what you do.
Yes.
The timing is the moment when the person's ears are ringing and they're really they've just had some sort of bad thing happen. Is that the moment? Or if you wait an hour? Or maybe the moment is exactly right then and there. That is the right time. And so it's all these things kind of coming together and being able to discern that to have the maximum impact. Because how many times have you seen somebody? Well, I told them, I gave them the feedback. I let them know. I told them that thing was wrong. Okay, great. You told them. Congratulations. Did they hear you? Did they receive it? Did they process it? Was it internalized?
A sub equation of volume of feedback. This is something I'm starting to work on this year, and in part because of my partnership with you in the workplace. We have moments where there are multiple things that could benefit from being addressed. In therapy, they have a concept called the laundry list. If you bring to a child a laundry list of things they've done wrong, all the reasons why they're, to try to substantiate why they should recognize that they need to make a change. You have the inverse, opposite effect, that it becomes a pile-on and they become crushed under the
Yeah.
weight of the laundry list of things that you bring. And conversely, if you can choose Gemba Kaizen, which is my personal motto, it's been my personal motto for 30 years now, Gemba Kaizen, small, meaningful changes where they matter. So small changes, improvements is Kaizen, but where they matter. So that's a filter. Does this moment matter? And in this moment, am I going to provide a laundry list to substantiate, also known as now I've got you, you son of a, in couples therapy, or is it a singular moment that you can pull out something meaningful and small to begin a flywheel effect that will cascade toward positive change in the future?
I love that. I really do. And I'm blown away by it because the laundry list idea. How many times have we sat down and been like, this is what you do well. Boom, 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 boom. This is what you could improve on. Boom, 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 boom. What have I actually received? What have I actually heard? But that well-timed attaboy or attagirl, or that well-timed little nod, little something that clues it in, or you brought up your little league coach. I used to coach little league, arms up, hands up, swing through. You overwhelm people. You overwhelm people. But if you give them a little nugget, a little back to the ripple, you throw that little pebble in. And maybe it's not a little pebble. Maybe it's a big old rock. And it's a bigger ripple. It's that one thing, that one nugget instead of all the nuggets. And if you think about, again, our ripple metaphor, imagine when you were a kid, I think we've all done this, where we threw things into the water. You threw the one little rock, ripple. You threw the big rock, bigger ripple. You threw multiple big rocks. You had destructive interference because there were multiple ripples happening at a time. And so you didn't get as much of an impact. And so I think that that's why what you're saying there about the volume of it is incredible. And parents can probably relate to this when I'm talking to my kids about something. You can have those moments. And my dad used to call me out on it all the time. He's like, I've lost you. You're done. I can tell. Right. I'd go into Charlie Brown mode. Wah, 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 wah. And happens to me as an adult too. I worked for a guy in the military who, I mean, just would bag on us. Myself and my other COs, just a laundry list of ways we sucked. And so in my mind, I'd be like, okay, I'm on the 7th hole. It's 140 yards in. Wind's at my back. I'm probably going to hit a 9-iron. Right. And then he'd be like, Jeff, are you listening? Oh, yes, sir. I suck. Yep, I got it. I'm terrible. And then my buddy Frank would look at me and be like, yep, you suck. It's your turn. And then, and then when it was his turn, I'd look at him and be like, oh, it's your turn.
Jeff, there's neuroscience behind what you just said that supports the concept of oversaturation, dopamine release process that happens when there is novelty or meaning, as opposed to, let me sit through it again. Thank you, sir. May I have another? If you're just going to tolerate that bucket, and every parent will recognize this, where you're trying to get through and you pile on, you get the laundry list going, and you can tell that they're just tapping their foot until they're ready to, okay, can I go outside now? Are you done? Because the message gets muddled by too much stimuli and eventually loses its impact. Whereas we all know this story where I'm not mad at you, son, daughter, I'm disappointed in this one thing. There's nothing more show-stopping than exactly that one, I'm disappointed, versus here's all the things you're doing wrong. Because when it's all the things you're doing wrong, I can't discern what I should work on first, whether I'm a worthy human being, or how I'm ever going to get out of this hole of judgment from you. But if it's one thing that I want you to work on because I care, my intent is good, the timing is right, and here's the context, cool. But everything, the game falls apart, well, that's going to diminish to the point of deflating.
So I want to ask you a question. When is a time where your efforts to be impactful maybe missed the mark and you had the opposite effect? So all the right intentions, but if we think about it in terms of the equation, maybe something was off and it just didn't work.
There's a patient I remember at University of Kansas, the hospital attached to the School of Medicine where I taught. And there was a patient, and I was rounding, and I had a bunch of interns, and this was back in the day when interns would follow, there'd be a whole crowd behind you, and the poor patient would be sitting there being dissected, visually by everyone in the room. But that's what we did back then. So I'm standing in front of this patient. He was a machinist at Boeing for like 25 years, and the computers were coming. CATIA. There was a modeling program that was being built, and so guys like him who were masters at the manual work, and he was very scared to pick up the computer. He became depressed and suicidal. Ends up in the hospital. Instead of meeting him where he was, acknowledging how difficult his situation was, I started looking for the bright side, positive. And here's a person who was thinking of ending his life less than a week ago. And I'm talking about, wow, your wife loves you so much and your kid, blah, blah, blah. He could not hear any of it. If any of that were front and center to him in the first place, he would not be in the position he's in. So I lost him with my feedback, well-intended. That's what diminishing is, according to Liz Wiseman, the unintended consequences of well-intended behavior. I wanted to help him have hope, find hope, but shoving hope at him with a laundry list of reasons why he should be happy, grateful, and looking forward to the rest of his life, not only alienated him in that moment, but destroyed any sense of trust that would be built through feeling seen. And so the interns behind me, we walk out of the room. One of the interns, he said, so how did that go? And I said, well, crash and burn, and don't, listen to what I say, not what I do. So I said, let's use this as a moment of, what went wrong there. And he said, you didn't meet him where he is and incrementally bring him along. I was throwing big rocks in the water and hoping that they were going to splash him out of this, when in fact, if I had just sat by the riverbank and tossed one tiny rock in there to start a real effect, who knows what could have happened. Thankfully, I had other chances to partner with him and be more realistic and check my intent to meet him versus my intent to wow him with all the ways that he's great. Big lesson learned. What's your moment that you think of?
I was in command of my first ship, and we did a engagement survey. I want to give a quick shout out. I had dinner last night with my friends Steve and Julie, and they both listened to the show. And so
Steve and Julie.
Yeah. Woo. So the engagement survey, the results were, one of the things that came back was a comment that said, the captain would chew his arm off and beat us to death with it if it meant getting the job done. And I never felt more seen in my entire life. I was like, yes, yes, I would. I will not fail. And then I realized something. While that is true, I'm a driven person and I would find a way to succeed. One of my favorite quotes is a quote that says, I will find a way or I will make one. It has guided me for years, but it made me realize that how you go about executing matters. So to my bosses, they loved it. I was checking boxes and getting things done. But how I was going about doing it, the way I was driving people, how I was communicating the intent about how we were doing it, while it was having an impact, right? The net value was high. It was not the type of value I wanted to have. And that was a really important lesson to me. Ooh, maybe so first blush, they get me. They see me. And then on the other one, I was like, ooh.
Growing edge.
Like maybe that's not, when you're a henchman down in the organization, maybe that's a really good quality. When you are orchestrating the success of multiple people, maybe that's a less good quality. Finding a way to balance that and harness it. And again, there were times where my team appreciated that drive and they were receptive to it. There were times, right? And I'm talking about the timing and the receptivity. Sometimes the timing on it was off. Does everything have to be a crisis? Is this a 6 p.m. Friday problem? Or could this maybe wait till Monday? Or is it even a problem that we have to address? And being able to discern between those elements so that, again, you can have the impact, I think that's really, really important.
I'm curious, Steve and Julie, you're sitting there with them last night. What prompted you to remember and tell that story?
Steve and I served together, and we were talking about a situation that one of my clients was facing, because Steve's in a leadership position, so is Julie, and talking about how you pick your moment for maximum impact. The fact that you and I talked about the receptivity piece, I think that that makes a huge difference. You know, how receptive is your audience to the feedback you're giving? And are you drowning out their receptivity? Are you think about signal ratio from my sonar days or my radar days, where am I overwhelming the receiver because I am giving too much, or is it just the right amount? And it got me. There were times when Steve and I worked together, Steve would say little things to me and it would help me. Or I would make little corrections to him about go do this, go try that. And it had a great impact. And most of my big moments were people, just little nuggets, that little rock in the pond that caused the ripple. Are you okay? I can think of Jonathan McCurtis, who worked for me on one of my ships. Every day he'd come by my office. How you doing today, Captain? I'm good. How are you? And he'd always say, I'm copacetic. And so it always made me laugh. And he's this big, hulking, muscular guy who's a bodybuilder, and he's copacetic. Great. I'm glad you're copacetic. And no matter how my day was going, that helped me. The little check-ins you and I have. You okay? You good? Hey, that was really helpful. Good. Thank you. That was it just all of those things together can have a magnifying impact. But if one of those pieces is off,
Yeah, that's the context part. When something kind is said or supportive, but in context, everything else that's been said in the past week has
yeah,
been harmful, or you're not going to receive it as well. Likewise, if every single time you do anything, it's amazing and wonderful, you're going to have a diluted impact when you hear
yeah.
that.
The volume of positive feedback, the volume of everything's awesome, you're so wonderful. Is that impactful then? If everything I'm doing great, I'm wonderful. That speaks to what you were talking about the volume of feedback.
Yeah. So I'm coming to a conclusion as part of this conversation. I'm going to invite the listener to help us figure this out. Nuance, subtlety, increments matter. If everything's positive, nothing stands out. If everything's negative, nothing can possibly have impact to make change. It's the nuance. And I want to say to Steve, thank you for your service. I want to say to Steve and Julie and you, Jeff, in this conversation you had, how cool to know somebody at different chapters of your life where you're able to retrospectively look back and say, I might have handled that differently, or I might have interpreted that feedback differently. And thank goodness, fellow human beings, we get to evolve over time. And most of the time in our life, when we have a crisis and we uncover that something needs to change, it's not some fatal flaw, something that's totally broken about us. It's usually a strength turned up too loudly. It's usually my good part taken too far. We just do too much of it. So the subtlety factor, if there's one message to take away from the ripple effect, is Gemba Kaizen, tiny incremental changes where they matter, instead of the laundry list, full bore. Now I've got you, overload. You mentioned earlier too, Mrs. Debbie, your sixth grade teacher. She believed in you. And that has had a ripple effect throughout your life, I'm
It has.
gathering.
It has.
How did she communicate that she believed in you?
So it's interesting. The delivery, kind gestures, body language, tone of voice, words used, good eye contact, consistent follow-up. And really this was the cool thing. She was as quick to tell me I had done well as she was to put my tray table up when I did wrong. And so then you
It was a
felt seen.
balance.
It
She
was a
had a
balance. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that that's important too. We run into things with our clients, and I think as leaders, we see stuff where it's like it's easy to give praise to an extent. And sometimes it's easy to really give corrective actions to people who are really messed up. But it's that consistent piece that the consistency communicates care. If I only tell you you're doing well at your annual review, am I sending a consistent signal that I care about you? But if I'm telling you every time you drift either above the line positively or below the line negatively, that I see where you are in relationship to the standard, and I'm providing either reinforcement or correction, one of those sends a more consistent and meaningful signal. And I would argue that it's that consistent communication, that consistent bit of feedback that is more impactful than the I'm only going to drop one big rock, or I'm going to drop them all at one time and see how the ripples may or may not impact one another.
Mhm. In this age of AI we've all entered, this is going to become more important than ever to be able to discern. Everybody's had the experience with their AI being overly solicitous. Everything you say is genius, Susan. You should publish that. You got to put that on your radio show. Really, ChatGPT? Is that, I said I'm gonna have a peanut butter sandwich, and you're saying that's groundbreaking news. So I had to teach my artificial intelligence partner how to discern the kind of feedback that I both want, but also cringe need, so that there would be, to your point, consistency in a meaningful way. So Simon Sinek wrote the book Leaders Eat Last.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to add to that statement. Leaders are the last to speak, and they speak the least. Now that's an overgeneralization, but and you do this, you will often be the last to speak in a meeting, a conversation. Part of that may be you have inductive reasoning and you want to hear all the data and come to that. But the other part of it is I get to trust as a listener and a participant in this conversation that you're going to be thoughtful about what you choose to say, instead of Eddie Haskell, the minute you get the answer. I wonder what the listener thinks about leaders speak least and leaders speak last. What do you think, Jeff?
I think that as a leader, the moment you speak, you've slapped the table and have signaled a decision or intent, and your people are going to be really quick to want to please you. And you have then therefore shaped the flow of discourse. And instead of allowing the discourse to flow naturally to where you get the best out of people, you are now filtering or funneling their ideas. And that's a lesson I've learned the hard way. Leaders think they need to talk first, talk often, and talk loudest. And I don't know where that notion came from. If I'm not proactively leading, then am I leading? I think is where that comes from. And what I would offer you is you are only increasing your credibility as a leader and increasing your impact when you're cognizant of the timing, the intent, the context, and the delivery of when you are talking, such that you give people the opportunity to be themselves and to share their gifts. Otherwise, why have a meeting? Why have the conversation? Send an email, tell people what you want. And instead of leading, you can just manage the problem.
Taking the impact equation now to a new level, I'm imagining those 4 elements at the top: the timing, the intent, the context, and the
delivery.
Those are the leader's job to attend to. What is the timing for us? So that's a we. What is my intent? That's a me. What's the context? That's a we. Am I coming off hot and heavy from an upset, situation in the last meeting? And is the context kind of bringing me in with overkill emotion? Or are they having a rough time at home because their kids are homesick? So the context is a we. The delivery is a me. So the bookends of the top of that equation are about me. I've got to choose the timing, and I've got to choose the delivery. I need to, in a nuanced manner, pay attention to my intent and the context around us. But the job of the leader in all 4 of these levers, the job of the leader is to pay attention to that bottom element, receptivity. And receptivity, your 6th grade teacher somehow had understood and built a rapport with you where she knew when to push and when to pull, when to lift and when to nudge. And you get that rhythm over time. If you think about the 10 people you spend the most time with in your life right now, I would imagine that you could decide in this moment how safe you might feel with each one of them to push versus uplift, and how safe you would feel with them pushing you or uplifting you. And can that change over time? Can that dynamic change?
I think it does change over time, and I think it's something that you have to be willing to experiment and get wrong. I think sometimes we try to do too much. This is not a clean, easy process. This is a trial and error process. And I think about it from a parenting perspective. There are times I push too much on the kids. Sometimes I don't push enough. And you have to kind of watch. Okay, how's this landing? Too much? Okay, let me dial back. Not enough? Let me give a little bit more. Um, and let me see what I can do to try to find that sweet spot for the maximum impact.
Constant calibration. It's like driving a car. You have to constantly be paying attention to the direction, the speed, all of these elements around you. It's a constant calibration, as are relationships. Think about Steve. You've known him how many years?
15.
Okay. So he probably can nudge you, he probably can help you see a blind spot. If you have spinach in your teeth, he probably has the rapport with you to say, hey, Jeff. But at the same time, when you have a long time relationship with someone, that doesn't take away the need to pay attention to context and timing, et cetera, because we never know what the other person is going through in that day, in that moment. So that's where the humility of leadership comes in. It's radical acceptance that no matter how well I think I know this person or know myself and what I have to offer, I have to pay attention to the impact equation in order to get it right each time.
You think about it from a numerator and a denominator perspective. I can only control, right, the numerator. You own the denominator if we're interacting. My small input may have a huge impact on you in the long run. You don't always have to be trying to like have some big number. You don't always have to be trying to make some monumental change. It's about intentional influence. You and I have talked about this offline several times. The most powerful moments that we've shared with one another were what other people would consider seemingly insignificant or small events. That small comment, that small pat on the back, the hug, the you told the story about your mom holding your hand. Those little moments those are the watershed moments that zoomed out. Were they really that big? Yeah, they were.
Mm.
So our listener questioner this week, and this one resonates with me. I feel like my organization spends a lot of time talking about culture, but every decision seems to prioritize results to the detriment of culture. How can I help?
Jeff, that story you told earlier about how he would cut off his arm to get the results. Every organization is just a being. We are an organization. We're an amalgamation of different motives and wishes. An organization too has a relative drive for results, a relative investment in its people, a relative investment in its client, customer, patient. So if there's over indexing on results at the expense of the people, just knowing that, just recognizing that incongruence, where lots of posters on the wall about what we stand for, or lots of words about looking out for people, but the actions seem to reward and prioritize results. Having a conversation like this, just bringing that up to say, how do we balance a focus on results with a focus on people, knowing that take care of the people and the people will take care of the business. How do you handle that, Jeff?
Knowing when to speak up, when to make your changes. To your point about Gemba Kaizen, it doesn't have to be some loud declaration. You don't have to organize a march out or a strike. It could be, hey, we said we value this. How does that support this?
Quick example of this as we close. I went on a mission in my former company before I retired, and it took 10 years, but it worked finally. We had a value. We put patients first. And how many times would in a day an Excel spreadsheet or a meeting or a bottom line not seem to be focusing on the patient? And that's human nature. I get it. But I chose one aspect of we put patients first to focus on, which is person first language. We don't have schizophrenics. We have people who have schizophrenia. We don't have asthmatics. We have people who have asthma. So that person first language. So what I would do each time to say, hey, you know what? I heard asthmatic. I see we've got that in the marketing, in the commercial that is about to go out. If we could tweak that to be more consistent with our value of we put patients first, could we have person first language? So I would actually, in the moment where there's an incongruence of the value, call it out, not in a punishing way, not in a shaming way, to just say, oop, this little tweak can get us on track to fulfill our mission in this moment. So I loved your point about choosing moments. This is imperfect, right? We're not going to get it right every single time. In fact, this is Imperfect, Better After Broken, the show where we celebrate the cracks, the scars, and the stories that make us stronger. And I'm Susan Hendrick.
And I'm Jeff Cervello. Thanks for joining us this week. And I would encourage our listeners, as you march forward this week, know what you want to, know the impact you want to have. To quote the wonderful Susan Hendrick, know what you want people to know, feel, and do differently, and pick your moments, because it's about getting it right instead of being right. I stole two of your best quotes, and I'm not at all embarrassed or ashamed of it. So thank you.
I feel fancy right now. That is so dynamite to know that you found something useful that we shared at the table. Listener, check your intent, watch the timing, look at the context, be mindful of your delivery, and dear listener, focus on your receptivity. Palms up, receive so much more than fists up. What a great conversation today, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Bye, Steve. Bye, Julie.
They get me. They see me.